Hello everyone and welcome back to Dawn of War 3. This time I will still be playing as Orks, similar to the last video, but this game, as a bit of an apology for all the very lengthy, long-winded videos that I've done, specifically the patch notes video kind of analysis, which was over an hour long, and therefore was probably quite hard to kind of chew through, and then there was also the 45 plus minute long game that I uploaded as Orks. I have quite a short and snappy one for you guys today to peruse through, and as you might have seen from the name of the replay, this is going to be a very weird game in many ways. Not only is it a mirror matchup, but we ended up, me and the opponent, making many of the same moves as each other. So yeah, let's just see how that pans out, shall we? So first off, this is on the 1v1 version of Orks Maya, so it's more or less identical to the 3v3, actually no, 2v2 version of Orks Maya. You've got like a very obvious northern route, you've got the center route which has the elite point generator, and you've got the southern route. The southern point is the power point with 2 power nodes to upgrade with generators. The northernmost point is the requisition point with 2 nodes for requisition generators, and yeah, you've got power there, you've got power there as well for both teams. But yeah, the 1v1 version basically just removes one of the war camps or other main central structures, and honestly I think it works out quite well. So let's remove the fog of war, shall we? As I mentioned earlier, I am playing the mirror match, but not in terms of elites. So I am running currently with the Storm Boys, Warboss, Gorguts, and Beauty Demorkanaut, and my opponent is running the Gorkanauts, first off, which is pretty cool, because Gorkanaut was quite significantly buffed in terms of damage with the latest balance patch, as well as the Meganobs, probably largely because of the Meganobs command that gives a shield to your boys when you do the shout, which as you can see is one of their abilities. And he also has the Storm Boys for a bit of early game presence. So overall, I've got the more aggressive build. So yeah, let's start commentating the actual actions, shall we? So, given that I've got Beauty, I do have the custom force field upgrade for the War Towers, so I activate a War as soon as I have built this War Tower, and as you can see, 4 boys, I start shouting to get them on maximum movement speed, and in the same moment, my opponent does more or less the same thing, but as you can see, he has only 3 of the boy squads. So statistically, I should be favoured, more or less. Let's just check if he has any more boy squads. He does not. So yeah, we're actually in a pretty good spot here. We should just straight up win this fight. Worth noting that we actually didn't charge up though to shout level 3, and so we missed out on the shield aspect of the shout, which turns out to be reasonably significant. But we don't take significant losses. We do quite a lot of model damage to his squads, and we do actually lose one of our boy squads, but given that we started out with more than him, that's sort of okay. It's not great, but it's sort of okay. But as you can see, we both have the same idea: cap a point, make a sort of forward base, and then immediately war with a ton of boys to try and just overwhelm the opponent and get like a really early advantage. But given that we both did that kind of strategy, it just kind of neutralized and petered out in the middle. So that's a-okay fine, and as you can see in the northernmost point, the requisition focus point, I actually have sort of nailed this down with a listening post, so this is going to require him to move a good couple of squads to actually take control of this point, which is kind of hard to do because he initially decided to take the middle of the map instead of the northernmost point of the map. So if he moves from the middle, he very much runs the risk of me, as you can see, just poking around, just taking everything that he holds in the middle, which would be very bad for him. Although it is worth bearing in mind that he has not actually upgraded this point with requisition. He has fully upgraded, more or less, this forward, well, not forward, but this backward resource node that both players have access to. So I guess that's fine and dandy. So as you can see, the listening post does finish, so I've got a very nice kind of stable point there. The Gretchen in the stealthy bushes can't really do much about this, which is pretty much fine for me. I'm very happy with that situation. And once I'd built the War Tower, I more or less, as soon as I could, built also a Boys Hut. Previous Orc builds prior to the balance patch sort of initially went for a Daka Hut, as Looter Boys were really good against Assault Marines, despite the jump countering the Looter Boys setup kind of mechanic. The sheer damage from the Looter Boy itself would more or less be worthwhile. Also, trucks were pretty damn good as well, needless to say. So here, the opponent makes a bit of a push on my shield generator, but my Storm Boys have come in, and they can just immediately leap on these Looter Boys, getting rid of all of that DPS, which is definitely nice. And one of my boy squads is actually an Ard boy squad, so he's upgraded with Scrap, and that, coupled with the stick grenades, the stick bombs from this upgraded with Scrap Shooter Boy squad, really gives me just a lot more DPS than my opponent in this fight. One thing I didn't do very well though was I wiped out the initial Looter Boy squad and then completely forgot about my Storm Boys. So rip them, they died. On the plus side, I do return the favour. I get the sun off with an Ard Boy squad on these attempting to retreat Storm Boys, and with the quite high Daka from the Shoot Boys, I do wipe them out. And also, worth noting, I do defend my shield generator, which is worth quite a lot of resources, so that is more than worth doing when you can. So there we go, just pushing them back. I get a wipe, return wipe on one of his squads, run into some looters, and then try and get out of there whilst I can. But I suppose you can see the power in the Looter Boy squad still. Locking down an area of the map, so basically all of this area, if I run any just melee Orc Nob kind of Orc Boy squads, either of those, they will be really handicapped by the slow effect from the Scrap upgraded looters, which as you can see he's upgrading there, and he's also warring, which is kind of terrifying. So I respond with my own war, so once again, mirror movements here. We're both being as aggressive as each other, thinking the same things. Even though our builds are fairly different, him going for an early Daka Hut as a forward base, me going for a Boy Hut, we're more or less thinking along the same lines. And that's the sign of, you know, us both having a fairly good grasp on the game. And with the Ward bonus damage from the War Tower, I am able to push on the shield generator, but as you can see, he does exactly the same thing. At this point, he does have 3 Looter Boy squads. I activate the War on this War Tower, which you might say was a mistake, but as it does actually take bonus damage during its charge up for the War, which does kind of work against it being activated in a defensive sense if it's being directly attacked. But it also has the custom force field effect, which slightly counteracts the damage from all the ranged units that he does have. So as you can see, I do wipe out his shield generator, but in return, turnabout is fair play, and he does exactly the same thing to me, and I do believe that I lose this War Tower. Maybe I don't? Okay. Not too bad, not too shabby. So this is basically as aggressive as we can get. We're both kind of using War whenever it's off cooldown, and he's got a second War tower, so he can just use that, and since I defensively Ward, which, you know, again in hindsight doesn't make much sense, but since I did that, I don't have a War of my own to counteract that, but what I do have is soon some knobs coming out, so spoiler warning, knobs will emerge. And I also have a couple of trucks loaded up with Scrap upgraded Boys. And that means that I have a very viable counter, along with the jump and the suicide bomber from the Storm Boy squad, a very legitimate counter to all of his setup teams, which, let's take a look, he's got 3 Looter Boy squads, 4 Looter Boy squads. He is so committed to the whole setup idea of kind of combat that all of my counters to them really should be quite effective. So I launch the suicide bomber, get a nice bit of AoE on those melee squads, wipe them out, and also launch these guys in. And as you can see, I also have some Orc Knobs coming in as well, who are extremely meaty. And with all the melee squads just directly in the faces of those Looter Boy squads, and even the Shooter Boy squad, I'm able to wipe more or less everything he had. And you just saw the tail end of one of my Nob squads, well, my Nob squad, activating his taunt and dragging in the opponent's Storm Boy squad, and forcing it to stick around long enough for it to die. And now you can see the difference in population caps. I am on a very noble and most impressive 71 pop cap, constantly rising because I am indeed reinforcing, and my opponent is on 17. And unfortunately, one thing he's not doing is spending requisitions split between his two buildings, which would make sense, as that would allow him to build more units quicker, since he'd have two buildings working on it at the same time. But he really wants those Looter Boy squads, as we have seen previously, upgraded with scrap. They are quite good, but at this point in the game, now that I've proven that I have a legitimate counter to them, as a unit, with ejected units from trucks, with Nob squads just being super tanky in general, you know, I don't have much to worry about. And at this point I just have the numbers advantage, and I'm very aware of that. So he's on 50 pop cap just before this fight, and I am on 92. And I also have Gorguts, which I do believe I called in just at the back here, as that's the closest point, because I've got this resource point up to the west. So here, launching loads of units through trucks, through Stormboys once again, completely hard countering the looters, and at this point he has so little units to get buffed with the War that the fact that he gets the War off and I'm not War buffed really doesn't matter, as he just doesn't have the army to support this War effect. So Gorguts comes in, and quite frankly this is more or less the end of the game. A hyper-aggressive match, you might agree, with very similar movements. I would War, he would attack shield generator, I would push in, defend it, and then go on to his shield generator with my own War, and eventually it just came down to build compositions and army compositions. So looters are very good, especially upgraded with scrap, but with the trucks being as good as they are, and the eject mechanic, on top of the fact that I was equipped with these Stormboy elites, I really had all the tools necessary to just completely shut down an entire quadrant of his army composition. All those looters, and even the shooter boy squads, they really couldn't do much of anything at all once I had launched a boy squad upgraded with scrap into their midst and onto their faces. So yeah, there you go, a bit of a spicy match. Given that the last game went all the way into the late game, I figured I would just do something slightly kind of more intense, more compressed, and here we are. 1v1 Orks, for your viewing pleasure. So as always guys, thank you for watching, thank you ever so much, and if you want more Dawn of War 3 coverage, do feel free to subscribe to the channel, as more content will be coming up on this rather fun game. And yeah, see you in the next one. Ta-ta!